The grand palace of Xylaria rose high above the capital city, its towers glowing in the light of twin suns. Inside, halls carved of silver stone echoed with footsteps of armored guards and the whispers of nervous nobles. It was not just another day in the kingdom. Today was the day their queen would take a husband. For many it was a cause of pride, for others, confusion. For nearly all, it was a shock. Queen Serenia of Xylaria had ruled with wisdom and strength since the day she ascended the throne. She was known across the galaxy for her beauty, her sharp mind, and her courage in times of war. Yet when she announced her marriage, no one could believe the choice she made. She was not marrying a noble warrior from her own race. She was not taking a prince from a rival world to secure peace. She was marrying a human, the nobles whispered as the human walked into the grand hall. He was dressed simply, wearing a plain, dark robe without the ornaments of a prince. His name was Daniel, and he looked nothing like the warriors or lords who usually stood at the queen's side. His dark eyes were calm, his step steady, his expression unreadable. To the nobles, he seemed unimpressive, almost fragile compared to the towering figures of their own kind. Why him? One noble muttered under his breath. What power does he have? What kingdom does he command? Another sneered. A common human. How could the queen lower herself so far? Queen Serenia heard the whispers but stood tall, her silver crown shining against her long dark hair. She looked at Daniel and saw what others did not. She remembered the day they first met, on a battlefield where smoke filled the skies and danger pressed close. Daniel had not come as a conqueror. He had come as a helper, carrying the wounded, guiding children to safety. She remembered how steady his hands had been, how calm his voice sounded even as chaos surrounded them. In him, she saw not weakness, but strength of another kind, quiet, steady, and unshaken. The ceremony began with the chanting of the high priests. Light crystals glowed above as vows were spoken. Daniel's voice was steady, though softer than the booming tones of alien warriors. Serenia spoke her vows with the dignity of a queen, but in her eyes there was warmth when she looked at him. When the final words were spoken, the queen and the human were bound in the eyes of Xylaria. Some clapped politely, others turned away, muttering in disbelief. The queen ignored them. She had chosen her path. After the ceremony, a banquet filled the hall. Long tables overflowed with food from across the kingdom. Roasted beasts, bright fruits, and steaming spiced drinks. Music played, though the mood was uneasy. Nobles raised their glasses but whispered doubts. Daniel sat quietly at the queen's side, listening more than speaking. Every time a noble tested him with sharp words, he answered with calm politeness. It only made them mock him further. "Your Majesty," one lord said loudly, his voice dripping with arrogance, "does your husband know the art of battle, or is he only skilled in pouring wine and telling soft stories?" The hall filled with laughter, but Daniel did not flinch. He looked at the lord, his expression calm. "There are many kinds of battles," he said simply. "Not all are fought with swords." The laughter faded slightly. Some found his answer clever. Others rolled their eyes. Queen Serenia placed her hand gently on his arm, silently thanking him for his patience. Later that night, when the banquet ended, Serenia walked with Daniel through the palace gardens. Moonlight from the twin moons spread across white flowers that glowed softly in the dark. The queen sighed, her voice heavy. "You heard them," she said. "They doubt you. They doubt me. They think I made a mistake." Daniel looked at her, his dark eyes calm. "You are the queen. You do not need their approval." She studied him for a moment, then asked the question that had weighed on her heart. "Why did you agree to this marriage? You could have returned to your people. You could have lived a life without the burden of a crown." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because when I saw you on the battlefield, you stood against fear when others ran. You gave hope when others gave up. I could not turn away from that, if you will have me. Then I will stand with you. Whatever comes. The queen's chest tightened. His words were simple, but they carried a strength that was not loud, yet unshakable. She smiled faintly. Then let them doubt. We will prove them wrong together. In the days that followed, life in the palace grew more complicated. The queen carried out her duties with grace, but whispers followed her everywhere. Some said she had lost her judgment. Others hinted that she had been bewitched by some human trick. Daniel continued to act as he always had, quiet, observant, helping where he could. He repaired old machines in the palace workshop, trained with the guards in silence, and even walked among the common people, listening to their troubles. The people of the city began to see him differently. Children smiled when he passed, remembering how he had carried them to safety during the war. Workers thanked him when he repaired their tools. Slowly, outside the palace walls, respect for him began to grow. But inside the palace, the nobles still doubted. One evening, as the queen prepared for council, her closest advisor, Lord Kale, approached her. He was tall, armored, with eyes sharp as blades. He bowed, but his tone was heavy with warning. "Your Majesty," he said, "forgive me, but your choice may bring danger. Already rival houses speak of rebellion. They see weakness in your husband. They believe you can be overthrown." Serenya's eyes narrowed. "And what do you believe, Kyle?" Kyle hesitated. "I believe humans are fragile. He seems gentle, yes, but a throne is not a place for gentleness. It is a place for power." The queen dismissed him, though his words stayed in her mind. She returned to her chambers where Daniel was waiting. He stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She walked to him and whispered, "They think you are fragile." Daniel turned to her. His expression was calm, but there was a glint in his eyes she had not noticed before. "Let them think so," he said softly. "Strength is not always what they believe it to be." For the first time, Serenya wondered if there was more to him than he revealed. His calmness, his patience, his quiet answers, they felt deliberate, as if he was holding something back. She did not press him with questions, but deep inside, a seed of curiosity took root. And beyond the palace walls, shadows began to move. Not all who doubted the queen were content with whispers. Some were already planning to strike. The palace of Xylaria stood tall and bright, but inside its walls unrest was growing. Queen Serenya had married Daniel, the human many nobles saw as nothing more than a common outsider. They expected him to stumble, to fail, and to prove unworthy of standing beside their ruler. Yet days passed, and Daniel continued to move through the palace with calm steps and quiet dignity. He never boasted, never raised his voice, and never tried to prove himself. To some, his silence was weakness. To others, it was mystery. Still, the whispers grew louder. In the Grand Council chamber, where banners of silver and gold hung high, lords and ladies of Xylaria debated not only laws and trade, but also the human husband of their queen. "He is not one of us," Lord Varen sneered, his deep voice carrying through the chamber. "How can he sit beside the throne? What claim does he have to power?" A lady of the council added sharply, "Our enemies watch us. They see a fragile human at the queen's side and believe we are weak. This will invite war." Queen Serenya raised her hand, silencing the room. "My husband does not claim power," she said firmly. "He does not need to. He is here because I chose him. That should be enough." Her words carried authority, but she noticed Daniel's face as he sat quietly beside her. He did not speak, though his dark eyes seemed to read every noble in the room. Serenya wondered again what went on behind those eyes. That evening, Daniel walked the gardens alone. Moonlight washed over white blossoms that glowed faintly under the twin moons. The guards trailed him at a respectful distance, though he hardly needed them. He knelt beside a broken fountain, examining the cracked stone, and began repairing it with his bare hands. A servant who passed by watched in surprise. "Why does the queen's husband lower himself to such work?" the servant whispered to another. But Daniel only smiled faintly and said nothing. While Daniel lived quietly, danger was stirring in the city below. Rival houses that had long sought the throne whispered of opportunity. Their spies told them the queen had weakened herself by marrying a human. In hidden chambers they plotted rebellion, believing the palace was vulnerable. One group in particular, the House of Drelkar, grew bold. Its leader, Lord Malric, was ambitious and ruthless. "The queen has blinded herself," he told his followers. "She trusts a fragile creature who cannot lift a blade. If we strike now, she will fall, and Xylaria will have a ruler of true blood." They planned their move carefully, sending shadows into the palace as disguised servants. The first test came sooner than the queen expected. On a quiet night, while Serenia worked in her private study, the lights suddenly dimmed. The guards outside shifted uneasily, but before they could react, masked figures leapt from the darkness. Steel flashed in the air. The queen rose, her crown glinting under the faint light. She reached for her blade, ready to defend herself. But before she could draw it, Daniel moved. The calm, quiet man she had married stood suddenly like a wall between her and the assassins. His movements were so swift that even the guards gasped. With one strike, he disarmed the first attacker. With another, he sent a second crashing into the wall. He moved not like a fragile human, but like a seasoned warrior who had trained for years. Serenia's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him fight. She had never even seen him raise his voice. Yet here he was, shielding her with a strength that made the assassins hesitate. The masked killers lunged again, but Daniel's reflexes were precise. He caught a blade with his bare hand, twisted it from the attacker's grip, and turned it against him. In moments, the room was silent. The assassins lay defeated, groaning on the floor, their weapons scattered. The guards rushed in, stunned by what they saw. "My queen," one called. "Are you safe?" Serenia nodded slowly, but her eyes were fixed on her husband. Daniel stood calmly, his breathing steady, as if the fight had not even shaken him. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "It seems your enemies are bold," he said softly. The queen could not speak for a moment. Her mind raced with questions. Who was he, truly? How had he learned to fight like that? Why had he hidden it until now? The next day, the palace was alive with rumors. The news of the attack spread quickly, and so did the tale of how the queen's human husband had fought like a warrior. Some nobles refused to believe it. Others were shaken, their doubts cracking for the first time. In the council chamber, whispers filled the air. Perhaps he is not so weak. Where did he learn such skills? Could he be more dangerous than we thought? Queen Serenia sat on the throne, silent, letting the whispers rise. She herself was still trying to make sense of what she had seen. Daniel stood near her, quiet as ever, giving nothing away. When the chamber emptied, she turned to him. "You told me once that there are many kinds of battles," she said softly. "Now I see that you spoke from experience. Tell me, Daniel, who are you really?" Daniel met her gaze but did not answer at once. After a long pause, he said only, "I am who you chose to marry. That is enough for now." His words were gentle, but they left the queen with even more questions. Days passed, and more threats appeared. Nobles tested him with challenges. One arranged a public duel, claiming it was a matter of honor. The crowd gathered, expecting Daniel to refuse. Instead, he stepped calmly into the arena. His opponent, a towering alien knight clad in heavy armor, laughed at the sight of him. "You will fall in a single strike," the knight declared. But when the duel began, Daniel moved like water. He sidestepped heavy blows with graceful ease, his calm face never changing. With a single precise strike, he disarmed the knight and ended the duel without harm. The crowd gasped, and the nobles who had doubted him fell into uneasy silence. That night, in the queen's chambers, Serenia confronted him again. "You hide your strength," she said, her voice low. "Why? Do you think I cannot accept the truth of who you are?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft but firm. "It is not the truth that troubles me," he said. "It is the timing. Power revealed too soon becomes a target. Sometimes it is wiser to let others think you are weak until they show their hand." The queen studied him, her heart torn between awe and uncertainty. She realized then that her husband was far more than he appeared. He was not just a quiet human, not just a man of patience. He was a warrior who carried secrets deep within him. And though she did not yet know the full story, she understood one thing clearly. Those who plotted against the throne had made a grave mistake in underestimating him. Far beyond the palace, Wall's Lord Malric of House Drelkar heard the reports of Daniel's duel. His jaw tightened, but his ambition did not waver. "So the human is not weak," he said coldly. "Then we will test how strong he truly is. And if he stands in our way, he will fall, strength or not." The rebellion was no longer whispered. Plans for open war were already forming. And in the heart of the palace, Queen Serenia watched her husband more closely than ever, waiting for the day when his hidden strength would be fully revealed. The days after the duel were heavy with silence in the palace. The nobles of Xylaria no longer laughed when Daniel entered the hall. Their mocking words had turned into whispers of uncertainty. The human who had once seemed so plain had shown skill that rivaled their best warriors. Yet for Queen Serenia, the duel had not answered her questions. It had only deepened them. She lay awake at night, her thoughts restless. She remembered the way Daniel moved, fast, precise, almost too perfect. She remembered the calmness in his face even when a blade swung toward him. This was no untrained man. This was someone with years of discipline hidden behind quiet eyes. But why hide it? Why let the world think he was fragile? One morning, as sunlight poured through the tall crystal windows of the throne room, Serenia stood beside Daniel while the council gathered. Reports of unrest reached them. Villages loyal to House Drelkar had stopped paying tribute. Caravans had been attacked on trade routes. Rebels moved in the shadows, bolder than ever. Lord Varen, who had once mocked Daniel, bowed before the queen. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice edged with unease, "this rebellion grows by the day. We must crush it before it spreads further. Send the armies at once, show no mercy." The queen hesitated. She knew Drelkar's rebellion was dangerous, but she also knew the cost of open war. Lives would be lost, and the kingdom would bleed. She turned to her council, searching for a wiser path. It was Daniel who spoke, his voice calm yet firm. "If you crush them with force alone, they will rise again. The root of rebellion is not always hunger for power. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is doubt. If you strike without understanding, you may silence them for a time, but never end their cause." The chamber grew quiet. Many nobles frowned, unhappy that the human dared to speak in council. Yet his words struck some with thought. Queen Serenia studied him. His voice carried not only wisdom but also experience. She wondered what he had seen in his life before he came to her world. That evening, Serenia walked with Daniel through the quiet palace halls. "You speak as if you have seen rebellion before," she said softly. "You speak like one who has fought more than battles of blades." Daniel was silent for a long moment. His gaze rested on the distant stars beyond the high windows. "I have seen what war does," he said at last. "I have seen leaders who believed that victory meant only crushing their enemies. And I have seen how those victories turn to ashes. Power alone cannot hold a kingdom together." Serenia's steps slowed. "Then why not tell them who you are? Why hide your strength, your past? They would listen to you then." Daniel turned. To her, his expression calm but steady. "Because the moment I reveal everything, I lose the chance to be judged for who I am now. They would not see me as Daniel, your husband. They would see only the shadows of my past, and that may bring more danger than you know." The queen looked into his eyes, trying to read the truth hidden there. She saw not arrogance but caution, not fear but purpose. She did not press him further, though her heart burned with curiosity. Far beyond the palace, Lord Malric of House Drelkar was not idle. He gathered his allies in a hidden fortress deep within the mountains. Around a long table lit by torches, the rebels spread maps of the kingdom. "The queen is blind," Malric declared, his voice echoing. "She clings to her human pet as if he were a shield. But shields can be broken. If we strike swiftly, we will cut off her strength before she can act." A general of Drelkar leaned forward. "And what of the stories? They say this human defeated assassins. They say he defeated a knight in a single strike." Malric sneered. "Stories grow larger in the telling. He is still human, flesh and bone like any other. We will find his weakness, and when he falls, the queen will fall with him." The rebels agreed, their voices filling the hall. Plans of attack began to form. Back in the capital, life carried on, though tension hung over every street. Merchants whispered of rebellion. Guards kept their hands on their weapons at all times. And in the palace, Serenia tried to balance her duties as queen with the new questions in her heart. One afternoon she found Daniel in the training grounds. He stood among the palace guards, guiding them with quiet words. Unlike the drill masters, who shouted, Daniel's tone was calm, almost gentle, yet the guards obeyed, their movements sharper under his instruction. Serenia watched as he corrected a young soldier's stance, then showed him how to turn defense into counterattack with a simple step. When the session ended, the guards bowed respectfully to him, more than they once had. Serenia stepped forward. "You train them like one who has led armies." Daniel gave a faint smile. "I train them like one who has seen too many fall." She studied him closely. Every time he revealed a glimpse of his past, it was like a fragment of a larger picture, one she did not yet understand. That night, as the queen prepared to rest, a messenger rushed into the palace, breathless. "My queen!" he cried. "The rebels have moved. They strike our border towns. Villages burn. People flee." The council was called at once. Nobles demanded immediate war. Armies were ordered to march. But Daniel raised his voice once more. "Send soldiers, yes," he said, firmly, "but not only with blades. Send healers. Send food. Win the people's trust, or the rebels will grow stronger in their anger. Do not let Malric claim he fights for their survival." His words silenced the chamber. Some scoffed, but Serenia felt the weight of his advice. She saw the truth in it. She gave the order, not only to march, but also to aid the villages. Days later, Serenia herself rode with her soldiers to the borderlands. Daniel rode beside her, calm as ever. They entered villages scarred by fire, where smoke still rose from burned homes. The people bowed to their queen, but their eyes lingered on Daniel. It was he who walked among them, lifting children into his arms, listening to their stories, repairing broken carts with his own hands. To the people, he was not only the queen's husband. He was a man who saw their suffering. At night, around the campfires, soldiers spoke of him with new respect. "He fights like a warrior," one said, "but he serves like a brother." Serenia listened quietly. Pride swelled in her chest, though her questions remained. Who had she truly married? One evening, as they prepared to return to the capital, Daniel stood with her on a hill overlooking the burned lands. The stars shone bright above. "Your kingdom is not weak," Daniel said softly. "It only needs to believe in itself again." The queen turned to him, her heart full of gratitude and confusion. "You speak like a leader," she whispered, "but you claim to be no more than a common man." Daniel's dark eyes met hers, calm but steady. "Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between." Before she could answer, a scout rushed to them with grim news. "My queen, the rebels gather in the mountains. They prepare for war. Their numbers grow by the day." Serenia's hand tightened on the hilt of her blade. War was coming, and soon. And as she looked at Daniel standing silently beside her, she knew one truth. His strength would be tested again. But the deeper truth, the secret he carried, remained hidden in the shadows of his past. The mountains of Drelkar loomed dark under storm clouds. Smoke rose from hidden forges, and the sound of drums echoed through the valleys. Lord Malric had gathered his forces, rebels, mercenaries, and even deserters from the queen's own armies. His banners, black and red, fluttered against the wind. "The queen grows weak. Malric declared to his soldiers. She hides behind a human who pretends at strength. Tonight we march. Tomorrow the throne will be ours. His men roared in approval, their voices shaking the mountains. They believed victory was certain. Back in the capital, Queen Serenia prepared her forces. The council hall was tense, filled with maps, weapons, and messengers rushing in and out. Generals spoke of strategies, nobles argued over supplies, and fear pressed heavy on the air. Daniel stood quietly beside the queen, his calm presence steadying her even when doubt whispered in her heart. At last, Serenia raised her voice above the noise. Enough. We cannot sit and argue while Malric gathers strength. We march tomorrow. But remember this. Our purpose is not only to crush rebels. Our duty is to protect our people. We fight not for power, but for peace. Her words silenced the chamber. Even those who doubted her felt the weight of her conviction. After the meeting ended, she turned to Daniel. Tomorrow will test us both, she said softly. Are you ready for this? Daniel's eyes held steady calm. I have been ready. Longer than you know. The queen studied him, her heart stirring with both fear and curiosity. Every time he spoke like that, she felt the shadow of secrets behind his words. The next day, the royal army marched. Thousands of soldiers in gleaming armor crossed the plains, their banners flying high. Healers, workers, and volunteers followed, carrying supplies and aid. The people lined the streets to watch their queen ride at the front, her silver crown shining beneath the sun. Beside her rode Daniel, simple as always, his plain armor unmarked by rank. Yet the soldiers looked to him with respect, remembering the way he trained them, the way he fought in silence, the way he treated even the lowest among them with dignity. The march was long, and tension hung over the camp each night. Rumors spread of Malric's growing army, of strange weapons forged in the mountains, of betrayals whispered among noble houses. But whenever Daniel walked through the camps, the soldiers grew quieter, steadier, as if his presence alone reminded them they were not alone. At last, the royal army reached the mountain passes. Scouts returned with grim news. Their numbers are vast, one reported. They know we are here, they are waiting. That night, Serenia stood by the campfire staring at the looming mountains. The flames reflected in her eyes and her heart carried the heavy weight of command. Daniel approached quietly. You are troubled, he said. She looked at him, her voice low. I am a queen, yes. But I am also just one woman. Thousands depend on me. If I fail them, all will fall. Daniel stepped closer. His voice was calm, but his words carried strength. You will not fail them, because you do not carry this weight alone. I am here, and I will stand with you. When the storm comes, we will face it together. Serenia felt the truth in his words. For a moment, the fear in her heart eased. At dawn, the battle began. The rebels poured from the mountain passes, their war cries echoing like thunder. Arrows darkened the sky, and the clash of steel filled the air. The queen's army met them head-on, shields locking, swords flashing. Serenia rode at the front, her blade gleaming as she cut through the enemy. Her crown shone in the sunlight, and her soldiers rallied to her cry. But it was Daniel who drew the eyes of both armies. He moved through the battlefield with a speed and precision no one expected. He fought not with wild fury, but with calm, measured strikes. Every step was deliberate, every motion controlled. An enemy knight swung a massive axe. Daniel sidestepped, struck once, and the knight fell. A group of rebels charged at him together, but he moved like a storm, disarming one, dropping another, and forcing the rest to retreat. Whispers spread, even in the middle of battle. The human fights like 10 men. Who is he? How does he do this? Serenia saw him from across the field, her heart pounding. She had known he was strong, but this was beyond what she imagined. He fought like one who had lived 100 battles. He fought like a leader who carried the weight of worlds, The clash lasted for hours. Blood stained the ground. The cries of the wounded filled the air, and still neither side gave way. Then, through the chaos, Lord Malric himself appeared. Clad in dark armor, his towering form cut a path through the soldiers. His black blade struck down all who dared stand before him. His voice roared above the noise. "Serenia, step forward and face me, or hide behind your fragile husband." The battlefield froze for a moment, all eyes turning to the Queen and Daniel. Serenia gripped her blade, ready to ride forward. But Daniel stepped ahead of her, his calm face unshaken. "This fight is mine," he said quietly. The Queen's breath caught. Daniel! But he had already moved. The duel between Daniel and Malric shook the battlefield. The rebel lord swung his massive blade with brutal strength, each strike enough to break shields and crack stone, but Daniel met him with fluid precision, turning aside blow after blow, his movements faster than the eye could follow. Malric snarled, "You are no common man. What are you?" Daniel did not answer. His silence was sharper than words. The clash continued, sparks flying with every strike. Soldiers from both sides stopped to watch, the noise of battle fading as all eyes fixed on the two figures locked in combat. At last, Malric roared and brought his blade down with all his strength. Daniel caught it on his own sword, the force shaking the ground. For a moment they stood locked together, eyes burning into each other. Then Daniel shifted, his movements precise as lightning. With a swift strike he disarmed Malric, sending the black blade spinning into the dirt. The rebel lord stumbled, stunned. Daniel pressed the tip of his sword to Malric's throat. His voice was calm, steady. "Your war is over." For a long moment, silence hung over the battlefield. Then the rebels faltered, their will breaking as they saw their leader fall. The Queen's army pressed forward, surrounding them. One by one, the rebels dropped their weapons. The battle was won. That evening, as fires burned across the mountains, Serenia walked among the wounded, offering comfort and thanks. Her people hailed her victory, but in her heart she knew it had been Daniel who turned the tide. She found him standing quietly at the edge of the camp, his sword laid aside, his eyes fixed on the stars. She approached, her voice soft. "You saved us all. You saved me." Daniel looked at her, his face calm but unreadable. "It was not only me. They fought with courage because of you. A queen who leads from the front inspires hearts far more than a sword ever could." She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "You are no common man. I see that now, but I still do not know who you truly are." Daniel's gaze lingered on hers, his silence heavy. At last he said only, "One day I will tell you, but not yet." Serenia's heart ached with both gratitude and longing for answers. She did not press him. For now, it was enough that he stood beside her. But in the shadows of the mountains, whispers stirred once more. Malric's defeat was not the end. Other enemies had seen Daniel's strength, and they were already plotting how to test it. The Battle of the Mountains had ended in victory. Lord Malric was captured, his forces scattered, and the rebellion crushed. The kingdom of Xylaria rejoiced. In the capital, banners of silver and gold waved in celebration as the Queen returned. Crowds filled the streets, cheering her name, praising her courage. But though Serenia smiled for her people, her heart remained restless. The image of Daniel standing against Malric haunted her thoughts. His skill, his speed, his calm in the heart of chaos, these were not the gifts of an ordinary man. She had married a husband who claimed to be common, yet every step he took revealed the opposite. That night, in the quiet of the palace gardens, she finally spoke the words that had weighed on her heart. "You cannot hide from me any longer. Daniel," she said, her voice steady though her chest was tight. "I saw you defeat Malric. I saw the way you move, the way you fight. No human untrained could do what you did. Who are you truly?" Daniel looked at her, his dark eyes calm, but in them was the weight of many years. For a long moment he said nothing. The wind stirred the silver leaves around them. Finally, he spoke. "I told you once that strength is not always what people believe," he said softly. "The truth is, I was not always what I seem now. Before I came to this world, I was part of a war your people never knew. I commanded soldiers, made choices that broke nations, and carried burdens I cannot forget. I left that life behind because I was tired of blood. I wanted peace. That is why when I saw you on the battlefield protecting your people, I chose to stay. Not as a commander, not as a warrior, but as Daniel, a man who could stand with you." Serenya's breath caught. She had suspected he carried secrets, but to hear it spoken so plainly shook her heart. "You are a leader of war," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, and I carry the scars of it still. That is why I never boasted, why I never revealed myself. Because power is a heavy weight, and I wanted to live as more than the shadow of what I once was." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, she reached for his hand. "And yet when my kingdom was threatened, you did not turn away. You stood with me. You saved us. Whatever your past is, it does not change what you are now." For the first time in many days, Daniel allowed a small smile to touch his lips. "That is all I ever hoped to be." But peace was not yet secure. Though Malric had been defeated, word of Daniel's strength spread beyond Xylaria. Envoys from other kingdoms arrived, bearing both gifts and veiled threats. Some sought alliance, hoping to bind the queen's mysterious husband to their side. Others whispered of danger, fearing that Xylaria now held a weapon greater than any army. The council grew uneasy. "If other worlds see your husband as a threat, they may unite against us," Lord Varen warned. But Serenya stood tall. "Let them come. My people will not be ruled by fear. And Daniel is not a weapon. He is my husband, and he will not be used as a tool for their greed." Her words silenced the chamber, though doubt still lingered in some hearts. Soon after, a final test came. A coalition of enemy raiders, hearing of Xylaria's supposed weakness, descended upon the outer borders. They believed the kingdom, weary from rebellion, would not resist. The queen rode once more at the head of her forces, Daniel at her side. The soldiers, now seasoned by battle, followed with fierce loyalty. They had seen what Daniel could do. They no longer doubted him. They marched with pride. The battle was swift but fierce. Raiders swept across the plains, burning villages and striking with cruelty. But this time the people of Xylaria did not falter. They rallied around their queen, their courage unbroken. And in the heart of the battlefield, Daniel revealed his full strength. He fought like a storm unleashed, each strike perfect, each movement graceful, as if he could see every path before it happened. Soldiers said later it was as if he carried the memory of 1,000 battles within him. He shielded the wounded, protected the weak, and struck down enemies with precision that left survivors trembling. The raiders fled, broken and scattered. The plains were saved. When the battle ended, Serenya stood beside Daniel on a hill overlooking the quiet fields. Smoke still rose in the distance, but the kingdom was safe once more. The sun set in gold and crimson, painting the sky like fire. "You cannot hide anymore," she said gently. "They have all seen your strength. They know you are no common man." Daniel looked at her, his face calm. "Perhaps it is time I stop hiding. But remember this, Serenya. The strength they see is not what matters most. True strength is not only in battle. It is in standing for what is right, even when the world doubts you. That is the lesson I learned, and the lesson I will never forget." The queen felt her heart swell with both pride and love. "Then let them call you what they wish, warrior, commander, legend. To me, you are Daniel, my husband, my strength." He took her hand, and for the first time he bowed, not as a warrior, not as a leader, but simply as a man who loved his queen. In the months that followed, Xylaria entered a new age. Peace spread through the kingdom. Trade flourished, and old rivalries began to fade. The people spoke with admiration not only of their queen but also of the quiet human who stood beside her. To them he was not a weapon or a mystery. He was proof that true strength came in many forms. And though Serenia still wondered about the shadows of his past, she no longer feared them. For she knew the truth of the man she had married. He was not defined by what he had been, but by what he chose to be now. Daniel's secret had been revealed, but his heart remained steady. He had left behind the weight of old wars and found a new life, not as a hidden commander, but as a husband who stood with his queen. And together, they faced the future, not as a ruler and her weapon, but as partners, bound by trust, courage, and the quiet strength that no blade could ever break.